Thank you so much for tuning in to Empowered Mundo's podcast, you guys.
Welcome back.
We have a really, really good topic in store for y'all today. If you tuned in with us last week, we talked a lot about Depression Sucks. We had a special guest, Brandon Williams, who shared his testimony about his road to recovery in terms of overcoming depression.
It was a great conversation. Listen, if you have not listened to it yet, we need you to make that a point after you listen to this podcast. If you're an individual who's ever struggled with symptoms of depression, whether it's mild or major, this podcast will be available to you, and it's made for you.
Yeah.
So make sure to tune in, listen, catch a vibe. We've got some funnies in there. We got some facts in there.
Yes, we do. So something about Deanna and I, we're both trained counselors, and what we offer is online coaching to individual because we emphasize resiliency and mental toughness. So we know what we're talking about. When it comes to things like depression, anxiety, pain, or trauma, we have the expertise in that. And what we want to do is empower el mundo, right? We want to empower the world. And one way of doing so is spreading this type of testimony and awareness about mental wellness. So we're changing the connotation of mental health to mental wellness because mental health does not discriminate. And if anything, we want to embrace our mental capacities because that helps us get closer to wealth, success, and power. And that's what we want for you.
Yes.
Yes.
So with that being said,
let's jump into that mental barrier that's stopping you from succeeding.
Cognitive distortions.
Everybody's got them. Cognitive distortions, what are they, Deanna?
I definitely think that a lot of people are familiar with the term cognitive and distortion or distorted, but maybe not together. So essentially, cognitions are your thoughts. It's your cognitive functioning, right? So it's like the dialogue, the functioning that's happening in the brain. And then the distortion is like the irrational part of it. Like it's distorted, like it's not full reality, but we believe it to be true. So essentially, I think that a fair definition of cognitive distortions is the experience of having irrational thoughts that can influence your emotions and behaviors.
100% agree with you. I love figuring out what cognitive distortions are and having somebody else define it. So I like playing this game called the synonym game, right? A synonym is a word that is similar to the main word. So what are some synonyms for distortion? Unrealistic, harmful, negative, irrational, right? Defeating, chaotic. Okay. And so we want to emphasize that sometimes our cognitions or our thoughts are so distorted that they are unrealistic, they are harmful, and they're very destructive. And we all experience it, right?
Yeah, I think that a lot of the time when we do experience those distorted cognitions or those irrational thoughts, it is in place. We have them because it goes in place of like a gray area or a gap of information. So if you guys listened or tuned into our Instagram live earlier today, we talked about how the brain likes to create a story. So we as human beings, we understand things when there is a start, a middle, and an end to it. Right. So even if there isn't a start, middle, and end to an experience or a scenario, our brain will fill in those gaps. So for example, if we're talking to our partner, our boyfriend or our girlfriend. So let's say I'm talking to my boyfriend. We make plans Monday night. We're going to meet up at 7:00 for our date. Monday morning hits, no good morning text. Lunchtime hits, no good afternoon text. No call. 5:00 rolls around. And at this point, I'm like, we're not even going.
Canceled.
Stood me up.
Haven't heard from you. You stood me up.
You stood me up. Why would you even plan this with me if you're not even going to be here?
Wasting her time. 2019.
And then 5:30 rolls around and then you get that phone call like, hey baby, I was so busy at work. I couldn't get to my phone, but I'm so excited to see you in an hour and a half. And then reality sets in. It's like, oh my gosh, I spent so much time in that irrational thinking process that I could have potentially just like ruined the rest of the night.
Yes. So Deanna just gave a really good example of fortune telling, right? And that's when we take our crystal ball, we put on our Miss Cleo hat, and we start predicting things. We make things up in our mind because it makes sense to us. And at times those distorted thoughts that you're having, you can't recognize that it's something that's irrational. And so it takes practice, it takes patience, it takes intentional attention to what you're thinking, how you're talking to yourself, and how you're rationalizing certain types of situations. So, it's 2019, we get responses in a second, right? People respond to things all the time. We get read receipts. So, of course, you can't help having those types of thoughts, but you can help what you do with those thoughts.
But I also feel like in the world of media today, or just like instant gratification is what we need. We like things to happen right away, immediately, because that's when we will either invest in it or that's when we believe it. Because if something is supposed to happen months down the road, we don't have as much faith that it's going to happen. Because I think that we've just, in the culture and in society right now, we're used to being able to have things immediately let's be honest. Technology, incredibly
it's such a good tool.
Amazing.
It's such a good tool. I mean, it's allowed us to be able to spread this type of information in gold, right?
But I also feel like that's where we set ourselves up, because that is not how real relationships are.
No.
They're not always instant.
Absolutely not. They take time. They take work. And it takes a lot of self-awareness as well, right? How can you provide love to somebody else if you're not in love with yourself, if you don't have that self-love? And so one way of being able to gain that is by being able to do things like checking your thoughts, being able to catch those cognitive distortions that come up for you, checking them with objective facts, and then changing it to something that's more realistic and helpful for you. So I want to take Deanna's example of boyfriend not hitting me up for hours, and I want to change it into a different type of negative thought. So let's say it's 5 o'clock. I still haven't heard from him. I'm supposed to be meeting him up in 2 hours. And my first thought is, all guys are like this.
Ooh. The all or nothing,
right? Ugh. All guys are, well, actually, that one's overgeneralization, right? So I'm generalizing one person's, and this isn't even bad behavior, but one experience with somebody else, and I generalize it to everybody else. And this is really common in relationships, right? We call it baggage. And it makes it hard to establish healthy relationships because we carry this baggage and we overgeneralize it. So we believe things that all men are like this, right? All men don't care about me, or I'm not good enough.
Okay? But I think that the reason why we do that is because the brain needs evidence to believe that something is true. So if for the past 3 boyfriends, or the past 3 friendships, or the past 3 jobs have been really amazing in the beginning during that honeymoon phase, and then as soon as something real happens, or it's not all bubbles and glitter, that's when they escape, that's when they leave. Then by evidence shows that that's what happens. That's how relationships work.
Yeah, there's so many pieces that go into it. And so we have to understand that human beings, we can't help but recognize and emphasize the negatives. And this is a part of survival. It goes back to evolution, nature versus nurture. If we focus on the things that are negative, we have the opportunity to build from it and turn it into something that's positive or something that functions and works for us. And so when it comes to cognitive distortions, this is a survival technique. We have to understand it for ourselves in order for us to continue functioning.
For sure.
And sometimes the function isn't healthy, right? But it's normal for us. Chaos for some individuals is normal. Being negative is normal. And the reality of it is it's okay to not be okay. It's not okay to allow yourself to be in a place where you're dominated by negativity and chaos. That's not okay.
So when we are in a space of anxiety, depression, when we are experiencing many triggers that's maybe tapping into some undealt with or unresolved trauma, then it's going to be a lot easier for us to grab any of these cognitive distortions and really hold on to them and allow that to be our truth. So for example, some of the most common ones, we kind of mentioned it, like the overgeneralizing, and then the fortune telling. Some other ones that I have heard a lot of with working with clients, and then also with my own life, is the jumping to conclusions.
Relatable.
So jumping to conclusions, we either go to the mind reading or the fortune telling. And I think a lot of individuals can relate to that. And when we're in that space of depression and anxiety, our thoughts are already in the negative zone. You know what I'm saying? Like, we're already telling ourselves that we're incapable, we're unlovable, we always do this, we never do that. So it's going to be so much easier for us to mind read what other people think of about us.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I love asking the question, what would you do? What would you think? So let's kind of play that game with one another, okay?
Are you talking about the magical question? If I had a magic wand?
No, this is the hypothetical situation.
Oh, okay.
So let's say that you go to a friend's party, right? It's your best friend's birthday party. You show up a few minutes late and you recognize you're a little bit late, but you're there, right? You made it to the party. Yeah.
Listen,
Now-
this sounds a little personal for me.
So you walk into the party and the birthday girl says, "Thanks for coming," and doesn't give you the reaction that you were expecting, it being a close friend of yours. What would that initial thought be?
Like what they think of me or what I think of them.
Either
of that
or.
person. So this kind of this hits home for sure. Recently, that exact thing happened. It was a different type of celebration, but it was definitely for a really, really good friend of mine. Sometimes it's just when you're caught up in your own life, like you just kind of forget things and you forget dates. And so that happened.
So what was the initial thought?
That I had about myself was, oh my gosh, I'm always late. If I'm being real, I am always late. Everyone is going to notice how late I am. Mm-hmm. Nobody is going to think that I'm really her friend.
Okay.
People are going to think that we're not really as close as I think we are.
So I heard a couple cognitive distortions in just those few sentences. So we have the all or nothing statements, right? I'm always late. And then we also have the, what is it called? Ay, 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 ay. Me olvidó. No. It's emotional reasoning. So you take that emotion of feeling bad and you say things like, I'm a bad friend, right? And so while you were talking about your examples, my first thought was, she's mad at me. Right?
Yeah.
That would be my first thought if I showed up at the party and my friend didn't give me the reaction I was looking for. Oh my gosh, she's mad at me. What did I do? I thought everything was okay with us, right? And so that's a form of personalization. If I give her an extra gift, or if I give her more, if I tell her we can have a dinner one-to-one because I came late, that's a way that I can make up for it or compensate for it, right? And so that's a personalization thought. Things would be better if I did better. So I take somebody else's emotions and I take them on as if I have that much power to influence somebody else's day. And that's the power of cognitive distortions.
Yeah, because let me tell you, during that party that I attended, it was a rough hour and a half that I made. I was there about an hour late. So you really do go into it.
That's late.
It's pretty late. I am definitely aware of that. But let's be honest, like on the drive over, you're like in panic mode. So you're doing your best to be there
At least you showed up.
as close as you could be as to on time.
Yeah.
But nonetheless, that's where communication comes into play. Like, listen, this was totally not specific or on purpose,
right,
to reflect our friendship. I definitely just was late, didn't schedule it in my calendar. I'm so happy to be here. I can't wait for the next one.
Totally happens, totally normal. So another thing that tends to happen, especially with people who have jobs, so this is actually hit home at the beginning of the year when I worked for a corporation. So at the end of the year, you get your bonuses, right? Or you get your raise. And so the discussion was never held with me. The discussion was held with me, but it wasn't up to my expectations in terms of what I thought I deserved, right? So I did something called disqualifying the positive. I looked at the raise and I didn't look at it as if it was a good thing. I immediately took it as something that was negative because it wasn't as high. The number wasn't as high as I expected it to be or as I wanted it to be. So another good example are for students, right? They study hard. They study so hard for a test. And instead of getting the A+, you get an A. So you disqualify the positive. You don't recognize that you just passed the test with flying colors because your expectations were unrealistic. You had unrealistic thoughts about what you were going to do. And so
that means you're already going into it with a thought that it's going to be trash, that it's going to be negative, and that it's not going to be enough.
Self-defeating,
self-sabotaging, if you will.
Absolutely.
I think that another common one is called personalization. And I think this is very commonly seen in terms of ages, definitely in adolescents, definitely in children, definitely in teenagers, where we have the belief that one individual is responsible for all of the events that are happening, and that one individual has control of that. So, for example, when we were teenagers, or for those of you who are younger, maybe still living at home, if your mom is coming home every single day and she's pissed off, upset, like ready to pop off, attitude on 10, then our thought can be, it's about us. She's probably super upset because I didn't put up that last dish, because I'm still here. Instead of realizing that your mom is an individual, she's a human being as well. So maybe she is pissed off coming home because she had a terrible day at work. You know what I mean? So it's just really important to understand that if you can have awareness and not make things personal, then you're going to be a lot more happy when you have different interactions with your friends, with your family members, and with your loved ones.
And just to note, adults have a better ability to recognize their cognitive distortions when it impacts themselves and when it impacts others.
For example,
if you expect children to have that ability, that's a cognitive distortion right there. If you expect children to have the ability to recognize that something's that you're not thinking in a certain way that's healthy, then you have to check that as an adult, right? Especially as a parent. You want to be able to teach them, I'm not having a good day right now, and mommy needs a couple minutes, daddy needs a couple minutes to me, or, for myself, so that I can think a little bit more clearly. And so that's the tough thing about cognitive distortions. They're so unconscious that at times we don't recognize we're having them in those moments.
What do you relate to the most? Like, what do you typically go to in terms of cognitive distortions? What's your go-to?
I do a lot of fortune telling. I do a lot of jumping to conclusions, and I would say those are my main two. And it's because I experience way more anxiety. And so typically when I work with clients, I say things like, if you're stuck in the past, you may be experiencing more symptoms of depression. In relation to trauma. If you're stuck in the future, you might be experiencing more more symptoms of anxiety related to worry, panic, preoccupation, fixation. And so I tend to be stuck in the future, and I definitely credit that a lot to my upbringing as well as being an entrepreneur. When you have your own business, all you think about is the future.
Because you're like, oh, am I going to make this?
Yes.
Is it going to happen?
And so fortune telling is a sign of cognitive distortion. Future planning is a form of healthy thinking, right? And the difference between fortune telling, when you fortune tell, you got the crystal ball, right? You start making things up and jumping to conclusions. When you do future planning, what you're doing is you're setting steps towards your goal, towards achievement, and you're making it very clear what that looks like. So you don't have to guess, you don't have to worry, you don't have to panic, you already know. And future planning, man, is that a strength.
Oh, for sure.
It is such a strength. And understand you have to work on it. It's not something that just comes to people naturally. Some people have that ability to do future planning in the moment, get contacted with all these people to get a huge project going. Other people, they have to sit down, write it out, make a lot of phone calls, consult, and see it through. Either way, future planning is a sign of healthy thinking patterns. So understand, when you get that crystal ball out and you start hitting the Miss Cleo, it's not going to work for you.
Yeah. So what do we do with
What about you? What's your dominant cognitive distortions?
I will definitely jump to a conclusion in a heartbeat. I will create the story. I will create the plot, the twist. I might even create a sequel. You know what I'm saying? Like, I know novela. A full-blown novella. I have characters in place. I will be a true thespian, if you will.
Gasps in Spanish.
We definitely grew up on novelas. Our mom is from Spain, and so she just caso cerrado. That is a little sidebar. That is a show. She is a judge, and I believe she's Mexican, But she has this absolutely outrageous show that people come on. There's no way these people are real, but they also might be.
They might be.
It's just like that weird, like I can't really tell because it's so insane.
It's like Judge Judy in Spanish, but with chaos.
On 10. Yeah. On 10. So, okay, nonetheless, it's a great show. If you haven't seen it.
Caso Cerrado.
You can watch it on YouTube.
If you're interested in learning Spanish, hit the subtitles while you watch that show. It's perfect. It's perfect.
But yes, my go-to, for sure, jumping to conclusions, I'm filling in the blanks. I want to tell the story. My brain is always what's right. That's what I'm thinking about when I'm in that distorted space. My thought process is correct. Everyone else's is wrong.
Yeah. Period.
So
what do we do to recognize that we're having these cognitive distortions?
I think that the first thing is definitely having awareness and knowing that this is a thing. You know what I'm saying? So like the individuals who are on this podcast and who have listened, I think that you're going to be so far ahead of individuals who have never been exposed to this, because the fact of the matter is everyone experiences it multiple times a day. You get what I'm saying? Multiple times a day.
So in talking about cognitive distortions, the reason why we're focusing so much on your thinking patterns and your thoughts is because of our training. Our training states that thoughts are the most controllable concept or factors in comparison to your behaviors and your feelings to be able to control or manipulate. So, for example, our thoughts, a negative thought is going to make us feel negative, which is going to make us behave negatively. Right? So if we're able to change that negative thought into something that's more realistic or positive, then the theory behind it is that that's going to make us feel more positive and then behave more positively.
And to get a better idea of like how frequently you have thoughts, let's put a number on it. So on average, per day, the mind thinks between 60,000 or 80,000 thoughts per day. So the breakdown of that per hour is about 25 to 3,000. You know what I'm saying? So those numbers are extremely high. And if the majority of those thoughts are negative, like it's going to be very, very difficult for you to walk into your day having a positive experience and enjoying life and being happy and feeling pleasure, essentially.
Absolutely. That's a lot of stuff going on in your head.
So what do we do?
And then you sprinkle depression. You sprinkle trauma, you sprinkle substance abuse, you sprinkle anxiety, you sprinkle anything onto that, on top of all the thoughts that you're having, and it creates chaos. It really does. And so we want you to intentionally practice being intentionally attentive.
Yes.
And that means we're asking you to spend maybe 5 to 10 minutes by yourself, writing down your thoughts, listening to what your thoughts are, being able to really connect with your internal dialogue, because you need to know what's going on in your head. How are you making such good decisions not knowing what's going through your mind? It just doesn't make sense. And imagine how much more wealthy, successful, and powerful you'd be if you knew what your internal dialogue was, right? What the theme is. Is the theme positive or negative? And if it becomes more negative, what caused it? What caused the theme to change? And if it became positive, what caused that theme to change? Yeah. Right? Yeah. And that's what self-awareness is, being able to answer those tough questions.
So with all of that knowledge and all of the psychoed, which we love, I think it's really important to give examples of like what to do in those moments, especially now that we've gained awareness and we have a better understanding of what our thoughts are and if they're distorted or if they're rational or irrational, whatever that looks like for you. And so one thing that I definitely want to draw attention to is finding what is universally true. Universal truth is when you experience something and it's universally accepted. So no matter who has the perspective, the truth is not going to change with time. It's not going to change with the place. It's not going to change with the situation. So everyone who was in the room will be able to state that happened, right? So it's essentially what's being done in black and white without us coming in and adding the dialogue. What exactly was said? What exactly was done?
Facts. That's what I hear. Facts. Focusing on the facts.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So for example, if you feel like, all right, I'm spiraling. My thoughts are spiraling and they're just defeating and they are depleting and they are just completely ruining my relationship with myself or with any other individual. That is when we need to check in with what is universally true. What is true if your emotions were not attached. Because emotions do not have an IQ, right? Emotions don't have an IQ. But what is factual, emotions don't have an IQ.
I just think of the theory behind emotional intelligence.
Emotions do not, an emotion is neither good nor bad. In my perspective, an emotion is neither good nor bad.
Mm-hmm.
I think that we assign meaning to it. So if we don't like the feeling of pain, and we try to run from it or cover it up with like distractions, boyfriends, girlfriends, substances, working a lot, whatever the case is, if we are uncomfortable with that emotion, then we're gonna maneuver into something that feels a little bit more easy to deal with.
You're so DBT. I love it.
I'm straight DBT.
Straight up DBT.
I love it too.
Universal truth, straight up DBT. So I want to introduce the CBT skill, the reframe.
Did that make sense really quick though?
It did. Finding your universal truth and what the image is or what the vision is, what your mission is, and being able to stick with that.
A quick example, and then I definitely want to hear your point.
Sure.
If you're in that spiral of thoughts, irrational thinking, ask yourself, if there was a fly in the room of whatever that situation was, would the fly have the same perspective as me, or would they have a different perspective? Would it be a little bit more rational? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And then figure out where that lands on.
Third person perspective, for sure. For sure. So that's more DBT, dialectical behavioral therapy. And so in terms of cognitive behavioral therapy, this is called a reframe. A reframe is literally taking whatever that negative statement is and reframing it into something that's more positive and realistic. So what I'm going to do, Deanna, I'm going to say negative statements. I want you to reframe them.
I'm into it. Let's do it.
I'm a failure.
I can fail and still be successful.
Nobody likes me.
That's just untrue. There are people that like me, and there are some that I can also do without.
See, and that's that reality check, right? When we take that moment, it's, oh, no, that's not true. That's not true. But we have those thoughts, right? What was the other one I had? I'll never be successful.
Ooh, when we're down in the dumps, that's for sure something that we can go to, especially career-wise. I would reframe that and say, I have been successful, and right now is a tough time, but I will also find success soon.
That's beautiful. Right?
Shout out to Amanda Seales.
Yeah.
I gotta find a different, so I have to give her credit every time it comes out.
So sometimes our thoughts aren't positive, but they're more realistic, right? And so we want to emphasize that not everything is about being positive and glitter and unicorns and all that amazing bubbly stuff, right? Because it's just not a reality. Sometimes life sucks. La vida loca hits. She makes it chaotic. And right now things aren't going that well. So it's okay to say things like, you know what, that the statement, I'm never going to succeed. You know what? I'm trying. I'm doing my best. I've overcome a lot of things. I'm now much more resilient, and maybe I'm not going to get to the place that I wanted to get to, but I'm going to get somewhere.
I think you said something, I'm not even sure if you noticed it, but it was the key word. The and statement. When we use the and statement, it validates and provides acceptance for what we're experiencing and allows for two things to be true at the same time. So when we say, I am really having a hard time today, and I am going to self-care tonight so that tomorrow is going to be better, then we can say two things and have them be true at the same time. But sometimes what we do is we'll use the word but.
Yes.
And everything we say before but is bullshit.
Yeah, it's discredited.
It's BS.
It's discredited. So there are so many ways to combat cognitive distortions, to protect yourself from the overwhelming feeling that happens when we start to beat ourselves up or we get lost in the negativity. And so you can find your universal truth. You can reframe those negative thoughts into something that's more realistic. And you can also use the and statements, right? Taking the but and only using our butts on our bums and implementing the and statements, right? And those are just a few of many, many, many techniques that you guys can use to address cognitive distortions. But with that being said, One part is cognitive distortion, then there's emotional, then there's behavioral, right? And so we're going to break down those concepts throughout our podcast, throughout our episodes. So definitely make sure that you continue to tune in and listen to us. We post weekly for our podcasts and then on our social media platforms.
We're real active and we need you guys to be there if you're not there already. Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. Empower El Mundo. If something that we said today triggered something for you or you really related to it and you need more, we want to help you. What we're able to do with our executive coaching is also provide individual one-on-one work. So we will partner with you and we will identify what your goals are and how we can get you there with a good amount of time. You know what I'm saying? So if you need something, if you need some sort of support, some validation, if you need growth, let's be honest. If you need growth right now in your relationships, in your personal life or career, let's connect, let's partner, and let's do this thing together.
You can never stop growing. You won't stop growing, right? So you might as well go with the grow.
Oh, I like that. Go with the grow.
That was nicely done. That was nicely done.
You didn't hit my hand. God.
All day.
For those of you who are on the podcast and didn't see the video, we have three handshakes.
Yes.
They serve a different purpose.
All epic.
But I'm sure you guys did hear a little bit.
All epic.
All right, you guys.
So make sure you subscribe.
Yes.
You follow us. We are on all social media platforms. And thanks so much for tuning in, y'all.
Yeah. You guys remember, be in power.
Live empowered. Yes. You gotta live in power and be in power. You gotta be in power and live in power.
Bars.
Yes.
Hey.
Yes.
Hey.